Well, this game's kinda scary enough, but it's not really the Flash game that I automatically think of when I think about Halloween. See, for me, it all starts with a big, fat, orange cat. Heathcliff.
Alright. Garfield. Probably the most iconic cat next to Grumpy Cat. Ever since 1978, he's been all over the place. Newspapers, books, cups, all kinds of merchandise. He's had his own television series and specials, including a crossover with other cartoon characters from the 80s, at least 3 theatrical movies, and a couple direct-to-video movies as well. And of course, video games. Even though there exists a large amount of Garfield video games I have yet to play, like an unreleased Atari 2600 game, a couple Nintendo DS games, Wii games, and other games on a couple other consoles, one of my earliest memories was one of the first video games that I've played, a Garfield game on the Sega Genesis titled Garfield Caught in the Act. This particular game may have been one of the very first games I've beaten all the way through. I could play and eat this game for breakfast. The plot is that Garfield gets sucked into the TV after it broke, attempting to repair it, so Garfield goes through a series of movie-themed levels. The first level is a horror stage where you fight annoying ghosts, bats, and skeletons. The next level, you're a pirate trudging your way through the end. After that, you're in the caveman era. Then in a black and white noir titled Casablanca. Get it? Then you end up in an Egyptian mummy-themed level. Then the last level is the final boss where you reflect its projectiles back at it. This game brought me so much frustration and many memories as a kid, and though it may be flawed in some parts, I still cherish it because this game was one of my first Sega Genesis games next to The Tick, Sonic the Hedgehog, Clay Fighter, and even Beavis and Butthead, which was another difficult game I managed to beat all the way through. Without any cheats or Game Genie, just a walkthrough. Garfield Caught in the Act was also released on the Game Gear and on the PC. The game is also known for having lost levels, but that's a whole can of worms for another time. I'm here to talk about the other Flash games I hadn't gotten to. As I've talked about so many Flash games I've played throughout my childhood before, the ones I've played so much was the Garfield Flash games, mainly any that were available on the Garfield website. Back when Garfield.com was up in the early 2000s, it was an absolute blast. You could buy merchandise, get news and updates, and even see comics that would always be updated daily, which was really cool. Alongside the Flash games was also an edutainment sister website called Professor Garfield that mixed fun Flash games with educational learning.
G Professor G, G Professor G, Professor G Professor G, G Professor G, G Professor Garfield, we know you have a key. You can answer everything from A to Z, from advanced arithmetic and microbiology. Professor Garfield is the smartest cat you'll ever see. G Professor G, G Professor G, Professor Garfield. Do you have an answer for me?
Even though I don't remember too much of what used to be available, I remember some of the games like G-Cubed, Reading Ring, and the Comics Live Extreme, which was far superior from the default Garfield comic creator, which was very limited in terms of objects to use. Of course, over time, Professor Garfield's website updated and looked different and less creative, but it still had most of the same games available. But as soon as Adobe Flash Player became unavailable and Nickelodeon bought the rights to Garfield for whatever reason, anytime you type in Garfield.com in your browser, it would just take you to Nick.com instead. So now you can't look at how the website used to be. But anyway, let's talk about some of the Flash games that used to be available on the website before it was no more. Bean Me is as simple as it gets. You click on the selections in order and you watch an animation as Garfield's coffee buzz increases with each sip. It's amusing if you've seen it for the first time, but that's all there is to it. Just a short interactive video really, not much of a game if you can even call it that. Coop Catch is pretty amusing. You play as Garfield, who's now a farmer for whatever reason, catching eggs from chickens that are high up above his head. Not only do they randomly and continuously hatch eggs, they even hatch tomatoes and watermelons. If the tomatoes or watermelons land in your basket, you lose points. If they hit you on the head, you lose a life. It's frustrating and very fast-paced, but I can't help but laugh every time I play it, but it's just alright. With Dingle Ball, it's a bit tricky. You have to click and hold the mouse on Odie for just the right amount of time to make him jump and catch the Dingle Ball that bounces off the wall. It's pretty challenging. Escape from Hotel Munchie was a bland survival game that tied into the direct-to-DVD movie Garfield Gets Real. You're escaping from a burning hotel, avoiding fires and collecting points while making your way safely to the bottom. When I first played this game many years ago, it was super slow because of the lag, but thankfully now it's much faster. Professor Wally's Most Scrabulator was a fun game where you mix and match different characters, body parts, and costumes. This was a game that also tied into the other direct-to-DVD movie, Garfield's Pet Force. Many years ago, back when I made a couple of these, I remember printing these out and putting out a couple on my bedroom door. It was pretty cool. Lasagna from Heaven is somewhat similar to Coop Catch, probably a bit harder and more fast-paced. You use the mouse to guide Garfield to collect food and avoid any non-food objects, including Odie. But it's pretty impossible to avoid any of the objects. They fall out of the sky faster than a ninja on speed. But, oh well, I guess it's fun for a little bit. For the longest time, I had no idea how to play Sheep Shot. I never understood what I was doing wrong because the game would just take forever as I just randomly threw sheep everywhere. I thought you needed to throw the sheep at anything making loud noises, and that was it. Well, that's part of it. I needed to throw the sheep at Garfield too while he sleeps, just so he could sleep over time, and the game would be a lot faster. Even though I understand it now, I don't care for it at all. Punt the Pooch is similar to all those other launching Flash games, but not as good, and it's way too short because the game will only allow you to go so far. Unfortunately, with the way I play it now, it's missing some sprites, so it doesn't render the same way as it used to. This next one is just dumb. The Amazing Garfield. More like the amazing waste of time. It's supposed to be a card trick game where you select a card and you have to memorize it without clicking on it, and after that Garfield removes the card you selected, claiming he removed the card you selected. In actuality, he literally removed all the cards and replaced them with different ones, because why would you memorize them all? This game never should have existed, but I guess it's just something to fool kids. Haha. Crazy Kennel Breakout is an action platforming game. Nothing too great compared to Garfield Caught in the Act, but anyway, you go around a pet clinic of sorts, moving Garfield with the arrow keys, but the controls are a bit slippery. You walk around throwing dingle balls at evil-looking nurses, avoiding hazards, and you have to find and collect 5 keys to open a door at the end of the first and third stage. Once you make it to the end of the game, you find an escape with Odie, and you win the game. Funny enough, at the end, it was also a silly way to promote the video games to the live-action sequel, Garfield: A Tale of Two Kitties. How interesting. The other game, Mystical Forest Adventure, is basically the exact same game with the same animation and sprites used. Ironically, it also promoted the direct-to-DVD movie Garfield's Fun Fest. However, a couple of differences with this game are a bit weird. You get a couple different ways to attack, like throwing acorns for example, but one weird difference is that the controls to throw the items at enemies are swapped. In Crazy Kennel Breakout, you use the down arrow to throw items in the game, and then in this game you use the up arrow, so it takes some time to get used to if you go back and forth from this game and that game. In the first level, you go around collecting coins around this forest so you can pay a toll to go to the next level. In level 2, you have to collect pieces of a bridge to cross a gap in order to get past some sort of short boss fight, if you can even call it that. You do this by collecting funny things which make Garfield funny by pressing the same button as to throw items. This causes this frog-looking sensei to laugh, and after that, you win the game.
Ugh, I'm wasting my time with these. It's the spooky season, for crying out loud. I need to get into the spooky vibes of Garfield.
That's right, even Garfield had his share of creepy tales and scary stories, from his scary comics to his ghost stories, scary tales, and even his own Halloween special. But outside the fandom world, he's had some very disturbing creepypastas and fan art as well. Like this one of Garfield turning into some kind of demon merged with a Resident Evil character that also turned into a Game Boy style story you can watch on YouTube. This got so much attention that it also had a fan-made game called Lasagna Boy that's similar to the story. It's pretty creepy, but really good. But that's not the game I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about 2 Garfield Flash games themed around horror. This is Garfield's Scary Scavenger Hunt. This was a Flash game I really liked playing as a kid, and this was a game that had a lot of thought, care, and effort put into it for just a simple game. Even though I never beat this game when I was younger, it was still a spectacle to behold. It starts with a cutscene of Garfield reading a paper that says you have to find 7 packages of sweets in a haunted house like muffins and donuts. Why Garfield would randomly go to a haunted house to get boxes of donuts is anybody's guess, but it doesn't matter. As the game begins, you control Garfield with the arrow keys. The music and ambience is very creepy, and it still holds up, for me at least. The animation looks great, and you can use the mouse to click on objects to help you find these sweets. If you go to the left of the house, you can click on John, who can give you hints along the way. While you find and click on objects, you have to be careful not to get scared too much, because if your scare-o-meter at the bottom gets filled up all the way, you lose and you have to start all over from the beginning. You can encounter all sorts of scary monsters, creepy creatures, or just random things that'll jump scare you. But if you happen to find the sweets, thankfully it can lower the meter. The game is mostly simple, but we'll go through each puzzle. You can find a shovel and go to the back of the mansion and dig up your first treat, a box of sour cream donuts. You might notice the brand name at the top from Perfection Pastries, which is a subtle yet good tongue-in-cheek kind of way for product placement to put into a Flash game. I believe this brand or company no longer exists, but I can say it's quite an ambitious move to put product placement into a Flash game. Remember, this was back in the early 2000s, so something like this wasn't common at all, but it was pretty bold for them to attempt to put something in like this. Usually you expect product placement on just console games most of the time, but since Garfield is such a recognizable icon, it makes sense for different companies to ask for Garfield's image to give them more exposure.
It's like people only do things because they get paid. And that's just really sad.
Moving on. Next you find a key to the front door in this chest and you can enter the mansion. Then you can go anywhere to find objects to help you progress further. You can find colored keys to open specific colored doors, you can find a room with a lock combination where the code is indicated on the tombstone outside, which coordinates Garfield's birthday, and there you find chocolate muffins. There's a room with different objects covered in sheets, one of them holds mini cinnamon donuts, the others, well, take a guess. A mouse is holding a box of assorted donuts behind him, but you need to exchange a piece of cheese with him. A secret switch opens up in the attic where you have to help Bat spell out Garfield's name. Binky the Clown says that they can't spell. Huh, thanks Binky. If you succeed, you win a box of chocolate-covered donuts. There's another room where you play a couple of instruments and a game of Simon. It's pretty simple, but the ambience can be a little distracting. Even though you can't turn that off, you can at least turn off the creepy music itself. Next, there's a section where you need to put these books in order. When I was a kid, I never understood this part, but if you're a huge Garfield fan, you'll know that these are titles of Garfield books. The object is to put these books in chronological order when they were released by their year. So, after a quick Google search later, yeah, I know I'm lazy, you put these books in order and it opens up a secret basement where you find Lyman in chains. For those of you who may not know or remember, Lyman was John's friend and I believe his former roommate, who was also Odie's original owner, and over time he quietly left the series, though he has been referenced in every now and then in certain Garfield media. But many people on the internet theorize that John killed Lyman and kept Odie to himself. This right here probably began the whole lore and theories surrounding Lyman's absence. Anyway, Lyman wants muffins, so he tells you to go to the kitchen and find one, and once you give him one, he tells you to check the fireplace. The fireplace is unlit, so you can walk through it and drop into a trap where you find a box of blueberry muffins. Once you find every treat on the list, you win! The game must have gotten enough attention because it also got a sequel, Donuts of Doom. This time, Garfield mysteriously appears back in the haunted mansion, and he has to find more sweets to get him out. One difference is that throughout the game you can find and click on chocolate donuts in the background to add to your empty box. Once you find 12, you mark it off your list. So the first thing you have to do is to get out of the basement. You find a box of matches and light up the furnace, and so you can see a lot better. Next you need to find a skull key to exit the basement, but remember to grab a bone before you leave so you can give it to this guard dog before you can enter through the fireplace. Also, don't click on the bear rug now, it's alive. Next you find a TV remote on the couch, then you go to find the TV, and then you try turning it on, but it just explodes. But at least you get a box of sour cream donuts as a reward. As you can see now, the product placement of Perfection Pastries is no longer on the boxes in this game, so they probably didn't sponsor. After that, you just run into Wade, who's another character from a not-so-well-known Jim Davis comic series called US Acres, or if you live in the UK, it's called Orson's Farm. If you click on him, he gives you hints just like John did in the previous game. If you enter this room, you'll see a music pattern that you have to memorize. I hate this section. Just like the books from the last game, I didn't understand this part. You need to swat these spiders to make a music pattern, but before you do that, you need to find a newspaper to swat them. So, just like that, I did another Google search and swept past this part. Say what you want, but I don't care for this. At least I got my mini cinnamon donuts in the process. There's also one part where you have to stare at this picture very carefully. Then you go into a room where you break a mirror. Great, now I got 7 years of bad luck. But anyway, after you put it back together like a jigsaw puzzle, you get a bag of mini powdered sugar donuts. After that, you go into the attic where you play a short minigame of bats dropping chocolate chip muffins. You use the mouse to move the box around, and once you get them all, you win. Next, you find a bobby pin to unlock the fridge in the kitchen where you find Orson's dismembered head, warning you to watch out for sneaky mice. This lets you back into the upstairs secret room where you can play a game where you click on muffins that pop out of a hole. But if you click on the mice, that's a no-go. After that, you win a box of blueberry muffins. Then you move on to a game where you have to find a box of donuts where the skeleton man mixes them around and you have to keep your eye on where it is. Once you beat him 3 times, he asks for a best 5 out of 7. You can say yes if you want, but you don't have to, so you win and you win this box of assorted donuts. After you find all your sweets, you head towards the library where the secret entrance opens. You walk through this maze that's not really that creepy at all, but you run into these Binky the Clown bobbleheads that you click on and they give you a code of numbers to memorize. Then you put in the code for this locked door, and after that you win, and you can download a scary scavenger hunt screensaver that you can no longer access. Ah, the early 2000s. I wish I could go back to those days.
Well, those are a big handful of Garfield Flash games that I remember playing way back when. Now, hopefully I'm done talking about Flash games for now. I mean, there's nothing wrong, going back to them, but talking about them could be pretty exhausting. Which reminds me, I got a frozen lasagna in the freezer I need to eat, so I'll heat that up, eat it, eat some Halloween candy, and watch some scary movies, and enjoy this Halloween night by ignoring trick-or-treaters. What? Are you kidding me? Who would have eaten this entire thing while I was gone? Great. We can probably get some pests running around the house now.